Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo Q&A episode. I have three questions I want to dive into. But first, before I do that, if you are interested in learning more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, why it's important, two different types of body recomp, 10 things you need to do, then my free body recomp checklist is for you. And the link to that is in the show notes. And that will give you a really good idea of all the things we talk about here. And we'll give you the knowledge you need as well too to figure out what you can and or what you should and maybe what's not as important if improving your body composition is your goal. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic or today's question. So I have three questions. First one is going to be around HRV. Basically, I had my podcast episode that was released Friday talking about if it's low, how we should change training, things like that. So definitely go check this out for a little bit more in-depth information on that topic. But somebody asked me, hey, can you dumb down HRV for me? Mine's always really low. And so I want to dive into it just a little bit more here. So HRV, it stands for heart rate variability. Okay. And it's a way to just look at your overall recovery and like how your nervous system in general is functioning. Okay. It's basically the variation in time between each heartbeat. Okay. And it's measured in milliseconds. It's not your heart rate beats per minute, but rather how inconsistent the timing is between beats. And so to me, this is always counterintuitive. I would have thought that like less variability would be a better thing, but it's actually the opposite, right? We want a higher HRV, and we'll talk about the exact numbers and what that needs to look like, is an indicator of your nervous system is in a good spot and you're recover. Now, I don't think that just because it's low for a period, like that's always a bad thing, right? I think it's very context dependent here. So we'll look at that. But again, because your heart rate's high, your HRV, your heart rate variability is higher, it means your body can flexibly switch between stress and recovery states. And so again, the less variability it is, that means it's not as good at switching between that. And so again, if we want it to be higher, which to me is somewhat counterintuitive, right? And again, it's the balance. It reflects your autonomic nervous system, especially the balance between sympathetic, fight or flight versus parasympathetic, rest and digest. There. So again, higher HRV is more parasympathetic activity, better recovery, and just stress resilience as well too, right? Lower HRV is more sympathetic activity, possibly more stress, fatigue, or just under recovery, which in turn means like if it's lower, and again, we'll talk about what the number needs to be, things like that. It's not like, it just is a sign that we need to, again, it could be you've been training super hard, you have had a lot go on, but really it's just a state that we can't really push our body like super hard, right? If we continue to do that, like your body is going to be more focused on survival versus adapting and changing and improving performance and whatnot. So we can take it from that standpoint there. So again, we know we want it to be higher. A higher HRV is a good thing. Lower HRV means we have a lot of stress load on the body, we're under recovered, there's fatigue, whatever it may be. Now, here's the thing. People will ask, mine's low, but we need to find your number. Your number is the most important. So my understanding of all the things around HRV is there is no universal good number. Yes, obviously the higher it is, the better it's going to be, but in the lower it is, that's probably not great either. But at the same time, there also is some variability in the person, and finding your number is the most important. So really finding yours is really going to be the most important. Again, if it's super low, to me, that could be a sign that is it because you just have a generally low number, or are there some things that we can potentially improve? And I think at the end of the day, we always want to do that anyways. If somebody came to me and they had a lower HRV, and then we look in and it's, hey, obviously we want to work on sleep, and we'll talk about things that can lower it, and we're working on those things, and we're just not seeing it go up. And then we look at blood work and nothing's off there, and they haven't been diagnosed with anything. It's okay. Then maybe yours is just generally a little bit lower, and that's the baseline that we need to go off of. But if somebody comes to me and it's low and it's sleep's off, stress load's super high, their blood work is off, there's some things that are showing that we need to work on there, they have a super high training load, then it's okay, we probably can improve that number a little bit. And I do think you probably can increase this number a bit over time. Now, this is all relative to where you're at. So if you have someone who their lifestyle is completely trash and they don't train, there's probably a big room to improve that. Whereas you take someone who is doing everything possible and they already are like super well trained, they're doing everything they need to be doing in the right way, which most people aren't, then okay, we're probably not going to really be able to increase that number at that point. So hopefully that makes sense. I think the big takeaway though is that finding your number is super important on there. The next thing is going to be the consistency of it. Now, things like the Apple Watch will give you HRV. The way they go about it's a little bit different. You'll find that your number is going to be a lot higher when you do the Apple Watch. But the big thing being, whatever we take, we want it to be consistent with when we take it. Okay. So if it is something that you have to manually do, I know some take it like they'll base it off of like sleep and stuff like that. But again, we want to be fairly consistent with how we take that number there, right? As I said, the higher it is, the better it's going to be. The lower that means, or the higher it is, that means we're managing stress. We don't have too much stress. And then lower, that means less recovery, higher stress load on the body, etc. Now, so this is another thing that as you age, like the older you are, the lower that number generally is going to be. And again, this is based on years, but generally speaking, the older you are, the lower it's going to be. And that makes sense, right? You take someone who is doing everything right compared to someone who is, and they have the same baseline number, and one person's like, the person that's older is probably going to be a little bit lower on there. So age is a huge factor. But what are some other things that could potentially drop it? Again, we're looking at hard training, so it can drop from hard training, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So this is kind of what I meant by just because it's low, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Anytime we try to change our body or push performance or do something, like there's going to be some fatigue involved with that. And so again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Poor sleep's going to make it drop. If you're getting sick, this can be a great way to see if you're getting sick. So illness will make it drop. High emotional stress, just high psychological stress, high stress level on the body is going to make it drop. Dehydration. And then even potentially being in a deficit and potentially even low carb intake can also cause it to be a little bit lower. So you may find that it's going to be a little bit lower when you're dieting there, which again, it's okay. If you are someone who just chases this number, then you could be someone who's now you're never going to train hard and now you're never going to lose body fat. And so it's like, we have to, there's things though, like poor sleep, dehydration. There's things that high emotional stress, these are things that we can modify to get it better. But with the training side of things, we need to train hard at times to make a change. And so you're not going to avoid that. So sometimes the number is just going to be low because of that. And so I see this a lot I talk about resting heart rate with clients where they get so focused on trying to lower their resting heart rate that now they're stressing because of that. But then also things that we do need some stress and we need to push our body, like that's going to bring it up. And so if we're just constantly chasing that low number, then you're not going to actually be doing the thing that is going to help change your body. But again, it can be improved with obviously quality sleep, light movement. So light movement being like restorative type movements, maybe like some zone 2 type cardios, walks, yoga, stuff like that, right? Breathing exercises, meditation, well-managed training load, adequate food, especially carbs, especially if it's been super low. And then obviously working on recovery type things there. But as I said, with this number, it is like going to be based on what your goal is. So how would I change my training and nutrition and lifestyle? Obviously, if we're finding that it's consistently lower than what you typically have, it's okay. Maybe we decrease the intensity of our training for a day or two. And so I think where the stress is coming from, I think is super important because as I said, pushing your training will lower it. So if you just had a hard training session, it may be lower. So there's now how that could guide your decision is maybe now I'm focused more on the lifestyle types of things where I need to get good sleep. I need to manage my overall stress. Maybe this is not the time to be in a huge deficit. Maybe I need to eat a little bit more carbs. I need to focus on eating at maintenance versus I'm in a deficit and I just had super hard training. My HRV is low. Maybe I take a refeed day versus pushing through there. So I think it is really dependent on what your goal is. And as I said, being in a deficit, that's probably going to lower it a bit. We're not fueling our body with everything it needs, especially if we also have a lot of training with it. So that's how I would have it guide my training. I wouldn't in nutrition and things like that. Just anytime it's consistently low, it's just a sign that, hey, we probably need to focus more on the recovery side of things there. Because again, like to change the body, that is going to be a stressor on the body. And so you can expect your HRV to come down for a day or two or something like that. But I wouldn't necessarily always have it be like, oh, HRV is low. Now I'm not going to train like super hard. What is the goal? What are you trying to do? What have you done recently? How do you actually feel? And then again, if we find that, hey, day over day, it's super low, then we need to make a change. Now, if it's super, super low and you have a really hard training day, maybe you moderate your intensity slightly there, but we just want to be careful with overcorrecting and then we don't ever push ourselves there. So understand what's going on. So, hey, it's lower, but you know what? I've gone through a pretty hard training block and I'm really pushing it right now. Now I just need to focus more on giving my body enough fuel. I need to give it the right food. I need to also like focus on the recovery side of things, more restorative type stuff there. But again, maybe it's super low. And now you're like, you know what? Actually, when I look at it, my training's been super high. And then like my life stress is super high. And I haven't really been recovering really well. Maybe I'm going to lower intensity for a couple of days and really focus on the recovery side of things, right? That's how I would use it to guide my decision. I wouldn't be like, oh, if it's low, all right, now I need to do everything possible to increase it. And now I can't do hard training for 2 weeks. We need to be careful with that. So always consider what your goal is as well too. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into HRV and how to use it there. All right, so next question is around what are my thoughts on weighted vests? Let me get this pulled up here. All right, so what are my thoughts on rucking vests? So my thoughts are, it's hard to just give a general thought on it, but here's the thing. There's not going to be any magic to them. It all depends, right? It's a way that we can make our walks and hikes tougher, which isn't always a good thing, but sometimes it can be. If you walk without a weighted vest, it's going to be easier on the body to do that. But if you add a weighted vest, now you have more weight and it's going to be a little bit harder. Your heart rate's probably going to get a little bit higher. I think that it depends. What is the reason for doing it? Are you just doing it to make things harder? And again, that's fine. Like we can do that, but we just have to understand what is the cost of doing that. So if they want to try a weighted walking vest, but overall they're managing the stress load on their body, right? So maybe we can use HRV. They're managing their overall training load. They're adding in some weighted vest walks while managing intensity. It could be a good way to get conditioning in. Now you're getting a little bit of a higher heart rate and doing that for extended periods of time. And that can be a way to maybe get some right to get some conditioning in from that perspective. But if someone has like a high stress load on their body, a high training load, maybe combined with trying to drop weight, and they think by doing weighted vest rucks, it will unlock some magic thing, you're likely just going to be digging yourself into a bigger hole. So what is the reason we're trying to do? If we're just trying to do it just to make things harder, again, we just have to weigh it with everything we're doing. What's the overall stress load on the body? How's that going to impact that? And usually people that want to make things just harder for the sake of making things harder, they're usually lifestyle factors are off, and it's almost counterintuitive to do that. Whereas someone who probably, so that would be my thoughts on the weighted vest for that. It's what are we trying to get out of it? Is it a mental thing? There's not going to be any magical fat loss benefit to it other than, again, it's a way to maybe increase your energy expenditure, make things a little bit, or increase your heart rate as well too. But we have to weigh that in terms of everything else we're doing versus just in isolation. Just because I just see people do this and they see that people are doing weighted vests and is that going to increase fat loss? And not necessarily. You still have to focus on everything else. And again, if it's just a mental thing to make things harder, that's fine too. But as I said, we have to weigh it with everything else because I do think there's a benefit of just doing hard things. But again, it has to make sense more than anything. Now, I know Steve Hall's done this. I know I've had Jeremiah on to talk about this. Like they've done weighted vests. So basically, like in a fat loss phase, wearing a weighted vest is a way to offset some of the weight loss, right? In terms of like your NEAT and like resting metabolic rate. Could that be something that offsets some of that in terms of the decrease in metabolism? So it's a way to increase your to make sure that your calories don't have to get too low. And it sounds like that could be something that happens in a way you could use it. But from everyone I've talked to, it's just a huge pain in the ass. Like you have to wear it for the entire day almost, or at least more than 2 hours. And that can just be a pain in the ass to have to do that, right? So that's been the biggest thing that I've heard. It can be a way to help offset maybe some metabolic adaptation in a fat loss phase, potentially, but it's more so a pain in the ass than anything. So I think with the weighted vest, that's my thought on it is, what is the goal? Why are we doing it? And there's not going to be any magic to just wearing a weighted vest and you're going to see these huge improvements. We still have to look at, we just talked about HRV. We still have to look at your recovery and make sure that it makes sense to do that versus just, hey, somebody did this. It's a way to increase fat loss. And I don't think it's that straightforward there. So hopefully that's helpful if it gives you some insight into weighted vests. So my last kind of topic is off of all this in terms of a client brought up her average calories have been a little high over the last few weeks due to events and the holiday, but still she's seeing like really good progress in her fat loss phase. And she feels like her skills have come a long way from even a few months ago, things that have made this possible in terms of, so she's basically able to go out, enjoy things. It's having less of an impact on her body. Like her body's being adaptive to it. And like, she's still able to see fat loss. Whereas a lot of people, I feel like they come in and they're not able to do this, right? Like one night out or one maybe night where they had a little bit higher caloric intake, it like they like spiral out of control, right? Like scale weight goes up a ton. They just feel terrible. And this leads to them now feeling bad about what happened. Mentally, they just can't handle it. And it just leads to this spiraling, right? And then like now they're playing the next 2 weeks catching up from what happened. Whereas like in this client's example, she did this. She's able to go out, have a drink or two every once in a while. She doesn't have to track every last little thing that she's doing. And she's still seeing fat loss. And this has been something that I feel like I've noticed in my fat loss phases as well too. And I think it comes to this concept of building stress resilience, right? And when you build this, your body becomes more adaptable to anything life throws at it. And what this means is this is going to lead to easier, more effective body comp change, right? So again, for a lot of people, it only takes one thing, right? It takes one poor night of sleep. It takes one skip workout, one high stress event, one off plan meal, and they spiral out of control, right? Just like the thought of like anxiety and like they have an event or something stressful happens and now they feel like they have to overeat and they have to do all these things. Like they just spiral out of control. And again, if that's you, it's not a discipline issue. It's a sign your stress load is too high and your resilience is too low. Okay. And again, it's not fully your fault. Like the modern environment bombards you with stress constantly, right? So your stress bucket is full of unnecessary inputs, which is going to lead to one, a lower capacity to recover from stress equals every little thing impacts you more and takes longer to recover from. So every little thing that happens, it's like this big deal, right? Hey, I got into it with my coworker. Now I had to go eat a bunch of food to feel better about that, right? Or, hey, I skipped a workout. Now I feel terrible about it. And then that's leading to all this anxiety and stress, and that's leading to other things, right? So you had a bad day at work, and that's leading to all this type of issues, right? Like it just leads to all kinds of anxiety, things like that. And so it affects you, every little thing affects you more, and it takes you longer to recover from, right? This could, again, whatever unhealthy kind of coping mechanism we have, it leads to that and you spiral out of control, right? And this is also meaning you have also going to have poor adaptability to change. You can't increase your capacity because you're stuck in a vicious cycle. So when life throws anything your way, it hits harder mentally and physically. So not only does everything impact us more, but we also are in this vicious cycle of our body. It's in this vicious cycle to where it can't adapt to change. So people end up being stuck in this, right? And so you take this person and then now they go and try and do a bunch of like training, and now that stresses them out even more, and it leads to these things where everything impacts them more because they're just in this vicious cycle. So how to break that, right? Like your body can't bounce back, you feel anxious, bloated, stuck, and out of control. And again, most people just try to white knuckle their way through by training or dieting harder, right? Oh, I'm just going to eat less food, I'm going to train harder, and it's this vicious cycle. But when we can make our body more resilient, you can handle life without derailing your goals, right? Your body becomes more efficient and effective at change. And the good news is we can change this. You're not like, but it requires work in and out of the gym, not just pushing harder. So my client Carolyn, for example, she's week 13 of her fat loss phase. She's at her lowest weight without extreme restriction, and her weekends haven't been perfect. She's had social events, holidays, higher calorie days, but we've been able to build her stress capacity, right? So how have we done that? We've been keeping movement high and doing her conditioning, but managing intensity when needed instead of blasting it all the time. So we're being smart with recovery, but also pushing things and doing things as well too, right? Taking active recovery days when her body needs it versus just pushing through and doing more. Focused on maximizing performance in the gym and getting strong. We're focused on good training performance in the gym. That's going to allow her to feel good in her training. She's going to be able to actually get stronger and whatnot there. Taking time out of a deficit. If you're always just trying to push a deficit, that is something that's not going to allow you to raise your stress capacity. Prioritizing sleep and hydration. So again, these are things that are going to increase that stress resilience and stress capacity. Again, it's very similar to HRV, right? Planning ahead without being rigid. So by planning ahead, she's taking some of the stress load off of, like, she has a game plan. And so now she's able to when you have a game plan, maybe it doesn't go perfectly, but you're better able to adapt to any stressor that life throws at you there. Improving your overall her stress management skills, right? So finding things that help her manage stress and taking that time to unwind and relax, right? That's going to build your stress capacity. And then at the same time, we want to have controlled stressors that push her outside of her comfort zone, right? So we still do need to challenge the body, and we need to challenge ourselves, but they need to be controlled versus most people just white knuckle it and then they burn out after a week or two there. And now she feels a difference. What used to throw her off, it doesn't anymore. Her body recovers faster, and this means she can do more high quality work, right? She doesn't spiral. She's not she's not constantly anxious about losing or about being on track, right? You're not like, oh crap, I had a cookie, I'm off track, and now I spiral out of control. To me, that's a sign that you have poor stress resilience if that's the case, right? And she enjoys her life outside the gym without guilt and like feeling like she can't enjoy things outside of the gym. I just see a lot of people that they feel like they have to choose one or the other. Higher stress resilience helps your body adapt, recover, and change more easily. And once you build it, you stop fighting tooth and nail for every inch of progress, and you finally feel like your body's working with you, not against you there. And so this brings me to the big point of we want to have better habits. We want our environment to be better. We want to sleep better. We want to train, but we also need to be able to like be adaptable and to be able to work through any sort of thing that doesn't necessarily go to plan. And again, if every little thing like that derails you, we need to work on the stress resilience side of things. The perfect example of this is someone like, say, Brian Johnson, for example, the guy that does everything perfectly. It's okay, that's good. He may live longer, but at the same time, I don't feel like he's building up any stress resilience. And again, maybe he is going to be able to never die. Who knows? But to me, it's like we need to be able to be adaptable and not like neurotic about every little thing either there. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Hopefully this all makes sense. And again, most people are stuck in that vicious cycle of high stress load plus low stress capacity and resilience. And these are some ways that we can build it up. So hopefully that's helpful. And that's it for this episode. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. And if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN _. And that's where I'm most active on social media. So if you have any questions about this topic or this podcast or anything like that, that's where you can find me there. So that's it for this episode. I'll chat with you next time.